You'd mentioned something about staying sane.
Yeah.
What do you mean by staying sane? This was a non-work topic. This was one of three things that you'd mentioned on the intake form. So why is staying sane top of mind? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think there's I used to think the busier I was and the most stressed I was, the more successful I was, and the more it gave me like a sense of being useful and having purpose. And I think I've really tried to question that because it didn't leave me happy, and try and find balance and try and find purpose in different places.
Now, how do you stay sane, like in New York City? And I mean, you've worked at fast-paced startups. That's an aggressive, like intense pace. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't feel like I'm staying sane very well. I'm like, I take a nap every once in a while, but otherwise I'm pretty flustered. How do you do it? I'm
definitely not always sane. But I really, really try and control the stampede of thoughts in my mind. And there's a few tactics I've tried. I actually grew up in a family that meditated, but which is obviously very inspiring. But when you're 10 years old, it's the last thing you want to do. So I would say it largely put me off meditation. But it's something I've come back to and I guess found myself in the chaos of New York living. So I think that's one thing. I use the Headspace app and I can't go to sleep without it, without Andy lulling me to sleep with a sleep cast. So I think that's one piece. The second one is when I have periods where I'm down or super stressed, I actually find working out adds to my feeling of angst. So I signed up to a cold plunge called Othership in New York. And I found it a place that I could turn up to and have routine, but I wasn't putting the pressure on myself to lose weight or get stronger. It felt like a really gentle thing to decide to do. It turns out it's not gentle at all. It's wild. It's super hard. And I turned up to my first class, and Othership's quite a unique space. It's, I'd say it's very New York. There's towel waving and chanting, but it's a beautiful space. And I signed up for a 2-week free trial and I became addicted. The people I met there were amazing people. It's a community. It's dark, so it's not posy, but meeting people essentially not wearing loads is a really, really nice way of like getting rid of your inhibitions around people, and you form bonds really quickly. So I found this amazing community through Othership. I then, with a friend, we were going so often and we were taking everyone that we knew in New York and telling everyone about it, that we decided to send a pitch deck to the founder of Othership, a wonderful man called Robbie, and he didn't know us, and we cold emailed him and we told him all the reasons why we should be his ambassadors. And we then had a call with him. He was amazing. And we're now, I guess I'm an ambassador for Othership. So we get people to sign up and very fortunate to be able to go loads. So that's another place that I've gone that it's given me a sense of routine. It's really hard. And I think putting yourself through something that's difficult every morning before work was like really changed my mindset when I went into work, because I know that I can deal with hard things. You immerse yourself in water for, I won't quote the time because people will judge me online, but I would say a long time. And you want to die, like you think you're dying, and you don't end up dying. And afterwards, you have this enormous sense of release and endorphins and a sense of achievement. And so now when I'm doing hard things, whether it's work or anything else or difficult conversations, I take myself back to the cold plunge and I know that I'm brave and I know that I can do hard things.
I love that. Can you pull the mic just a little bit closer, I think? Like maybe a hand or two length away. I think it should be fine anyway, but I just want to make sure we get good quality. We're leaving the long game territory and we're entering Andrew Huberman and Joe Rogan territory, but I can't help but ask, because when you brought up cold plunges on the intake form, I had this intuition that you were talking about Othership, because when you're in New York, you're kind of talking about that or bathhouse.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you're hardcore, the Russian banyas. Yeah. That's not usually what people are talking about when they're talking about cold plunges now. Yeah, exactly. I was just there on Monday at Othership. So I'm like, I don't know if you can call me a regular. You probably go more often than I do. But I've been like OG. I'm like the hipster of cold plunge. Before we heard about it from Rogan and Huberman and all these podcasters. I found it in Europe. And it was this contrast therapy concept where you would do sauna. go to the ice bath, and sometimes they'd have hot baths too. And I loved that concept because I don't know what magic it was. There was something about, I think to your point, it's that tricking your body into thinking you're dying for a second, and you push through that. And there's something that it's like a sense of resilience or like a mental strength and fortitude that you build that then later in that day when you, I don't know if you're in sales, if you have to pick up the phone and call somebody that you don't want to call, or you have to have a conversation that you don't want to have, you can think back and be like, oh, it's kind of the same reflex that like, I don't want to jump into this cold water, but I'm going to like kind of bypass that reaction and go through with it anyway. I feel like it's got some psychological benefit, but then to your point, like the endorphins and the happy chemicals and probably the focus and adrenaline afterwards. Do you do it in the mornings?
Yeah, I usually do the 7 a.m. class.
7 a.m. I wish I was awake at that time. And you mentioned something about, I think the sauna too. It's like this probably intimate place where people's inhibitions are lower. There's something strange about being in such a hot space too, that I feel like people just open up, and during those free flow sessions in the socials, I feel like I'll meet strangers and I'm like in 10 minutes in like the deepest conversations I've had.
Completely. And at the end of each session, they do a sharing circle.
Oh, as a Midwesterner, those are very terrifying.
Same
I don't
for
think
Brit.
I've ever. Yeah, I guess we're on the same page.
Same thing. But actually, it's a place where it's like therapy. Sometimes I share to 100 strangers about my deepest angst. And then,
you do share?
I'm a big sharer.
I still haven't shared. I just
Do
listen.
it.
I
You
just sit
won't
by on the
regret it.
sidelines.
You won't regret it. You feel lighter afterwards, but no one knows you. And some people afterwards came up and they gave me the biggest hug and they were like, we're here for you. We've all been through stuff. It's just a really amazing community.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you were talking about, I think that we're probably, we got into the recording after you'd mentioned this, but moving from the UK to the US, that transition, you wanted to talk about that in general, but like the sense of like building community in a new place. Yeah.
I think people don't often talk about how hard it is. I think you see the Instagram glamour of like Alice in New York buying bagels, but it's really hard to move to a new place. You have your whole routine from home and your network. And I think I underestimated how much energy you have to put into rebuilding that. And at 5 p.m. when I'm leaving work, all my friends and my family are going to sleep in the UK. And so sometimes it can feel quite lonely. So I really had to make sure I didn't get sucked into loneliness. And I really was deliberate about going out and finding people and doing work networking and really pouring myself into the city. But definitely took more energy than I thought.
And you moved when?
I moved in August last year. So I've been here about 1.5 years now.
Relatively new then. And was it from London?
Yeah, from London.
Okay. So there's something about, I feel like a city, particularly New York, is a little bit more probably opportunistic for building community or like at least entering. Like, I don't know. I feel like you can kind of find your niche in a city like this. It may be harder in a place like, I don't know, Nashville, North Carolina or something like that. So at least you have the opportunity maybe here, right? But you also have the abundance and the kind of overwhelm of a massive city. Did you know people before you moved here?
Yeah, it's both of those things. I knew a handful of people who were amazing, but I actually, I met my first friend in a donut shop in Brooklyn, and she turned to me. We're in Peter Pan, if you know it. And she turned to me and she said, "Oh, you're British. I love British people. I think we should be friends." And we met up for dinner that night. And she's one of my best friends. She's introduced me to tons of her friends. She's from Richmond, Virginia. So I now go there. And I think having one anchor friend that helps you is really, I was super lucky to find her.
What are some other ways that you've built community? And do you think about it in terms of like, there's obviously like your friends, your social life, which could be divorced from like any business context. And then like you're also a marketing leader, right? You probably want some peers and like people who understand what MQL. Yeah, I have this acronym soup on this list, by the way. Nice. We've got MQLs, BDRs, PBM, ABM, like people who understand what I just said. You probably want some sense of that community too, I'm guessing.
Totally, yeah. And I think it's easy just to rely on work as a place to meet people, but I think doing both is really healthy. But from a work perspective, absolutely. There's actually a really welcoming, I thought it'd be quite cliquey here, but there's a really welcoming fintech community. But I guess I've found that if there isn't a community for you, you can create one. So my friend who I actually know through work, a man called Annie Sellers, who runs a really amazing executive search agency. I knew him when I was 21. They tried to hire me at the company, and we've stayed connected ever since. we've set up a very niche society, which is British marketers in New York. And it's an amazing community. We've got a WhatsApp group. It's super active. We do events and that kind of thing. So I think where I couldn't find community, I guess there's opportunities to create them.
One thing I'm always shocked at is how easy it is to just do things, right? And like in New York, you can get the sense maybe of, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome, but you could think like, who am I to like set up a meetup and invite people, and you start to overthink it and start to get paralyzed at like, oh, what if nobody comes, and like they probably got plans and all of this stuff. And I used to throw events in Austin all the time, which was a much smaller, and it's Texas. It's a very like open, friendly kind of place. And then I did the same in New York. Like I would host like a marketing meetup and throw like a calendar event on Google Calendar and just invite 12 people, and they'd show up. And then I did a bigger one and they still show up. And it's like, oh, you could just like invite people, and people want invites to things, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I guess there's an element of fake it till you make it. Like we've called it a community. I mean, I don't know what the boundaries of a community is. Originally it was 2 of us and we had this marketing community, but now it's really grown. So I think, yeah, you kind of have to back yourself. What
is the community that you built entail? Like, what do y'all do? Like, what's the organization? Like, what's the structure?
Yeah, so there's 2. There's one actually which I started in London, and again under the like, I wouldn't say there was anything formal about it, but I posted on LinkedIn saying like it's a new year. I imagine there's loads of BDRs and BDR leaders who are looking for new inspiration. The Christmas period for BDRs is really tough. So it's like a way to rejuvenate people. Would anyone like to come into the Codat office and we can have breakfast? And this was a community. And that's how it was wrapped up on LinkedIn. And we had tons of people come. We then did one online, and we had people from SF joining, and from like all over, really honestly, all over the world came and joined this group. We did breakout groups, and really, like, frankly, I was winging it. But we had amazing people come, and that's gathering momentum. And then separately, we have this, British marketers in New York, which Andy really runs, and I kind of help drive people to. But really, it's a networking group, super unstructured, but like warm and welcoming. We've also have British is like a loose term. We've got some people from the Netherlands, and we've actually got some Americans who have snuck their way in. So we're quite a welcoming group, but it's just nice to realize you can just create your own communities.
That's cool. And what do you think like the driving force is behind a successful community? I don't know if you've thought of the theory of mind there. Like how does somebody become attracted to a group like British marketers here, right? Like is it just like they want a sense of belonging? Is it they're looking for career acceleration? Like what is the common thread that kind of strings people together in these groups?
Yeah, I think everyone, would say they might be after different things, but I think people want connection and for feeling of togetherness and like they're not alone. And I think where I've seen these groups be really successful is when the people who are running the group are really open and like, I guess, vulnerable. Like we have my team at Codat, we have highs and lows every week, and we share like the best thing that's happened and then the worst thing, or like we have a sales villain of the week, or we have like we really share things that we're going through. And I think part of community is just feeling like you're not alone. And so I think being really open as someone that's running a community really helps to encourage other people to do the same.
Is Codat all remote, or is it in office? Or?
No, in office. So in London and in New York, well, there are a few remote employees, but it's mostly in office.
I was going to hypothesize that some of this is due to the fact that many of us work remote now. And I think like even for myself, like our agency's fully remote, and I'm constantly online in meetings and whatever, but it doesn't have the same connection, that depth that you get from an in-person conversation, which is also why I like doing these podcasts in person. And like we got coffee, we didn't do like a Zoom call or something like that. But I guess like you still want that even if you do have an in-office life, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think even though we might say we're in office, like we still have people dialing in all the time. Most of our meetings are actually still calls. Sometimes we'll all sit on calls next to each other. So I think that, I guess post-COVID, really everything does feel more remote first.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some B2B marketing stuff.
Nice.
I'm not going to cut this out, but what's top of mind for you today? The things that I've got written down are, what you had mentioned, BDRs, making BDRs successful and effective, moving to pods, account-based to person-based marketing, which is a very interesting one. and then the alignment of sales, BDR, and marketing. And I also put a couple notes on, you have contrarian takes on MQLs, which I have to get into. But I don't know if you took a train over here, like, on the way to the studio, what was top of mind for you in terms of what you thought you'd want to talk about?
Yeah. I cycled here because I'm a city biker. So mostly I was really cold.
In Manhattan?
Everywhere.
Adrenaline
all the
junkie. Yeah. That's terrifying to me.
It's great. I love it. Keeps me on edge.
Yeah.
But work related, there are a few things. I think one is continuing to debunk the myth of what marketing can drive for a business. And I think I've been speaking to a lot of companies recently and in conversations with CEOs or maybe even CROs, they'll speak to me and they'll ask me what kind of tactics I'm is my specialty. And I really am trying to challenge that as a question and say tactics don't drive outcomes. We really need to focus on changing the conversation to what are your business goals, and then orchestrating a team who should be, I would say, really pretty agile in order to meet those ever-changing business goals. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? What's the framing of what's a naive question that you think is what's the bad question that we could reframe to a better
question that makes me really frustrated is, oh great, you're a marketing leader, what do you specialize in, events or blog posts or email marketing? As
in they're looking at the channel first and kind of backing that into a business context. It's sort of square peg round hole. Correct. Trying to apply a solution to a problem, as opposed to, I guess the better framing would be the problem first and then kind of attaching a solution and figuring out if it's email or if it's BDR or whatever that thing is in the business context.
Yeah, exactly that. And my answer back is that's probably not the right question to be asking. The question to be asking is what are your business goals? My skill set, or I think what really great marketers are able to do is take ever-changing business goals and adapt a marketing team to support them, rather than live in the land of tactics. We run events and we do content and we do email marketing. We're a marketing function. And instead it's no, we support the business goals. And we've got a team of really excellent experts, but we're also agile. And I think that's still the conversation we need to keep having.
I always felt with the channel thing, I feel there's meta skills or there's components that are sort of horizontal across a lot of these. So a lot of it's writing or messaging, communicating, and then there's some portion that's understanding data and being able to make decisions based on data. Mm-hmm. But I feel if you've got some of those things in place, you could easily apply those to Facebook ads or SEO just with a little bit of domain understanding, which takes, 1 to 3 months to ramp up on how to run a good Facebook ads campaign. But if you've got the understanding as to how to do proper messaging and the data literacy to understand how to iterate and experiment, I feel that channel expertise, that specialty mindset, it's a little bit of a mirage. Does that make sense?
I totally agree. And I've only recently realized that. We at Codat, when I first joined, the emphasis was on driving a high volume of inbound leads. We then shifted our approach to focusing really helping drive upmarket and crack enterprise. And then more recently, it's how can we drive adoption for our happy or for our adopted customers. And the team have adapted extremely well, and they had to fight their own instincts, which is they applied for this job as a campaign manager for top of funnel inbound leads, and now they're doing adoption marketing. But I guess it took faith and them being really up for trying this approach, which is basically every quarter we reset their roles. Right. Okay. So what's the focus of the business? We speak to the CRO. Where do we need to be focusing? Okay. We've got 10 target accounts. Okay. You're now an account-based marketing specialist. And next quarter that might change, but building a team that's able to adapt, I think has been really successful. And I think that's where marketers are really trying to take things.
I think it's really hard to unwind a sense of identity that you have, especially if you take some pride over your experience and your skill set maybe built over the course of 1, 2, 3 different job roles for 5 to 10 years. If you're an SEO, I think it's hard to unwind the sense that you are an SEO, and maybe in this new business context, it could still be in content, but now you're doing thought leadership. You're not doing keyword research, right? Because it's what is that? If all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. If you're just an SEO, every problem looks like keyword research and new content to create or something like that. So I think it's difficult to, I think, psychologically unwind that sense of identity, right? But you've had to do that a couple times, maybe?
I had to do that like weekly. I totally agree with that. But I think that with AI, that's going to change everyone's sense of identities in marketing. Definitely, we need to adapt. Everyone's going to be forced to adapt, and I guess I'm encouraging my team to do that a little bit sooner.
Can you explain more? What is that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think the role of a marketer already is really changed. Like, we have an excellent content person and who came in as a content writer and is now an amazing content strategist, but really uses the superpower of AI to do the bulk of the research and a lot of the writing, and then fine-tunes it. And that's allowed us to be much more effective on our content, create much more personalized, targeted content, but it's totally changed her role. And so she's been able to adapt, but this is like, we're in AI light mode. Like, when we have a heavyweight AI running large portions of the company, we're all going to need to adapt.
So what do you think, like, if you were, I guess, starting today, like, how would you anchor yourself or prepare yourself for that future, which is still in some sense speculative, as anything in the future is. It's not just AI. It's, we're all predicting things that we don't know for certain are going to happen with 100% clarity. But with that framing that we see AI accelerating, we see adoption increasing, the models improving, et cetera. If you're starting today, like, how do you even anchor yourself as a marketer to provide that utility, be a valuable marketer in the future?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know 100% the right answer, but I guess something that I think is really important is hiring people no longer on just their domain expertise, but, like I said, on their resilience and their ability to adapt and their ability to take risks. And I think I'm actually not a natural risk taker, but I hire risk takers and I hire people that are obsessed with AI or obsessed with the next generation technology. Codat CRO's amazing at trying to push me out of my comfort zone. And so I think I'm trying to surround myself with people who are going to get me to the future so I don't lag behind. And I think I will have that mindset when I hire people. Like, are they agile? Can they pick up new concepts quickly? Do they feel tied and attached to a really specific role, or are they able to adapt and flex as new technology emerges?
I'm not a risk taker, says the cold plunging Manhattan bike rider.
Okay, that's true. Maybe I'm more a risk taker than I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Didn't you just finish like a multi-week ski trip as well?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Only 6 weeks.
I know many people who take fewer risks than that, so you're on the good side of the spectrum. Where was I going to go with that? Yeah, I think it's hard to hire for that. I think it's like, how do you find those signals? Because a lot of it is in, it's like people say in relationships, like if you travel with somebody that you're dating, that's a really good stress test, because often when you travel, something's going to go wrong. And then you see what, they're really made of when the flight's delayed and canceled and this doesn't happen on time. That stuff usually only happens on the job, right? There's questions that you can potentially use to parse that out. One that I like is, I want to say it was like Elon Musk's question, which is hard to even mention his name now because it's so political, but he's got a couple gems from the past. And I think he had asked, what is the hardest problem you've ever worked on and how did you think through it? Because then it gets more into that critical thinking and first principles thinking, as opposed to just saying I increased conversions by 12% because I was a conversion optimization specialist. But how do you think about finding those signals maybe early on before you've seen somebody stress tested by the need to adapt?
Yeah,
which I know is a very hard question to answer.
That's a great question. YC ask an interesting question to the people that are looking to invest in, and they ask them what's a system they've hacked or a way in which they've broken a system. And I think that's a cool question to think of. That's what they're looking for, specific hacker mindset. But I think there are powerful questions you can ask to really test. One question I always ask in interviews is, can you explain something complicated to me in a simple way? And I think that really helps you understand if someone has, I guess, the ability to translate something into to individuals and to people in a really clear way. And it really frazzles some people. But I think it tests, I would say, intelligence and EQ, because you have to really, really understand your topic and then really adapt it. And I just think that mindset of being able to grasp something, translate it and explain it is really critical to marketing, but also for this like resilience in the future.
Yeah, that's like the Richard Feynman method of learning, right? Like
I don't know him.
I'm going to totally botch this, but like when he was learning a new topic, he would essentially try to explain it in his own words or something like that, basically like summarize without using the definitions or the materials that he had learned. I'm totally probably botching that, but I think it's very difficult because you get a lot of information. Our ecosystem is filled with it. If you're on LinkedIn, you're getting like a million bits per second of just like information downloaded in your brain. God forbid you're on TikTok or X or like Instagram. And then you think about podcasts, and it's really easy to parrot information that you've heard elsewhere. I find myself doing it from time to time. And then I'm like, wait, that's not my opinion. Where did that opinion come from? What do I think about this? And I think it is a big challenge to actually say, like, what, in your words, what does this mean? Like, can you communicate this in the simplest possible way? Because it's easy to say, like, I don't know, like we were talking about Andrew Huberman. I could probably just parrot a bunch of stuff about dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin with ice baths. But I'm like, actually, it feels like you're dying for a second. And then when you're not dying, your body thinks that's cool, you know?
Yeah.
So then you feel happy hormones.
Totally. And actually, I've hired probably over 70 people in my 10, 15 years of working, and have like BDR hiring is really hard. Typically, they are either grads or have had one job, and being able to figure out if someone's capable or not is really hard. And I haven't always got it right. But we've hired people from super interesting backgrounds. One of our BDRs, Codat, who was extremely successful, was an ex-wine sommelier in Brooklyn, but had extremely high EQ and was able to adapt her messaging to anyone she was writing to, and picked up the technical pieces of Codat really well, but from her background and experience in service was amazing with people. She then referred to her friend who was a comedian who was amazing at writing and really funny, and that helped her get through the door of these big companies. And then we've actually just hired her friend who's also in the comedy circuit. And they've been three of the most successful BDRs that I've seen. So I think it takes, I guess, a bit of guts to take a bet on somebody who has a less typical background. But by asking the right questions, you can really decipher.
I like that, like lateral thinking, and I can see like the connection between somebody with a comedy background doing well as a BDR, because I am sure like BDRs have to face rejection after rejection, right? And I cannot imagine something more terrifying than going up on stage with material that you've written, and then just the prospect of it falling flat.
Totally, and being
heckled. It prevents me, who is an extrovert and I've spoken on stage and do this podcast and all that. I don't think I would do that, right? So there's that, and then there's like this idea of like getting attention in a very, like, I don't know if it's a hostile environment. It's a hard environment. You know, people have drinks and it's like noisy and whatever else, and like this idea that you can form like a thought in like a very attention grabbing way. So I can kind of see that connection, which is cool. I always think about that, like, how do I find underpriced talent in that, like a background that somebody wouldn't traditionally look into. Right? Like they don't have a sales background and they didn't necessarily graduate from Stanford. Everybody knows those things. Like those are priced in. But I feel like if you can find something like this comedy thing, which I don't know if it's like complete pattern connection, but that seems very interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely. And someone worked in an aquarium and was obviously likes fish and was a really good BDR. But then I've also really made mishires, people who have a super relevant background who I just thought I wouldn't have to spend as much time ramping. Frankly, it was a lazy thing to do for me. That was like had the wrong mindset and weren't agile. They were set in their ways. So yeah, it's BDR hiring. I could talk about it for hours, but it's definitely an art.
You were a BDR, right? And your background, was that at Bloomreach or like what?
Yeah.
Trace me the story of like how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I studied cell biology, obviously directly relevant to what I'm doing now. I really like cells. And then I decided I didn't want to live in a lab forever. And I was actually a headhunter for 2 years straight out of university. And I was hunting for senior marketing people and placing them into tech companies. And that's when I fell in love with tech. I was working with super cool companies that were just emerging. Must have been, I don't know how many years ago, a few, many years ago. And yeah, really exciting companies. And I realized I wanted to work in tech. And a friend of a friend referred me to Bloomreach, which was and is an incredible company. I still think that BDR job is the best job I've ever had. I basically got given a laptop and a target, and I got told I get paid every meeting I book with the world's largest retailers. And I just reach out to them.
No instructions, no playbook, no blueprint.
I mean, there was some loose training, but
play tables or automated sequences with AI written.
No, it was none of what there is today. It was really like I was using Gmail and literally pressing send and linking it to Salesforce. That was like as complex as my workflow got. Actually, throughout my time there, we implemented new tools. But really, like when I started and the early BDRs at Bloomreach were, we had nothing, but we had huge flexibility and a lot of autonomy and a lot of respect from the company. And it was an incredible role. So Bloomreach, at the time, it sold a site search product. So if you're on a retailer and you're searching for red dress, Bloomreach would power the search. And what I got to do is go on loads of online shops and break their site search. So I type in, I don't know, white shirt, and it comes up with something dumb, and I send them a screenshot. I'm like, your search is broken, you should buy Bloomreach. But these retailers get hounded, so you really have to find ways to break through the noise. I've got some entertaining campaigns I can talk you through, which some were successes and some were epic failures, but we really got creative there, and I think that's where I found my love for tech and marketing.
Can you tell me about those campaigns? Specifically the failures I'm interested in?
So there were two really bad ones. One was what we call Scongate, which is we decided to run a campaign. We were merging two of our products. And we had this idea that this kind of message of if you have a scone by itself and cream and jam, they're all fine by themselves, but together they make a cream tea. It's a very English reference. But together they make a better experience.
Like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Exactly. And actually, like to give more detail, it was started off as a peanut butter and jelly campaign, and that's what they did in the US. Okay. But the UK team were like, this won't fly. We need to do something. We need to UKify this. Like peanut butter and jelly is like not really a thing.
True localization, yeah.
So we tried to localize it. A big mistake. And so we enlisted this super random bakery in the middle of nowhere. And we sent them this card that said something like, all these things are fine by themselves, but they're better together, just like our new products. Maybe slightly better messaging, but that was the theme. And we asked this bakery to like package up these cream teas and send them to our VIP prospects with this note in. But what happened is this bakery they were really out of their depth. This like local country bakery, and we got them to do, I don't know, 100 orders. And they would put them on these like polystyrene plates and like wrap them in like cling film. And they forgot to put the notes in. And it happened to be the August bank holiday weekend. So it was a long weekend. And what happened is all the BDRs emailed their VIP prospects, the CEO of French Connection on Calvin Klein, saying, expect a treat from Bloomreach. And everyone got into the office after this long weekend to these rancid, unidentified packages. There was no note, there was no packaging of these like crushed cream teas with this cream that had gone off. And we were starting to get all these emails through, like, what the hell? Like, what is this? Like, this is and we had a crash talk, and we decided to own it. And so we sent this email to everybody, and we called it Scongate. And we said, we've just spent loads of money on the worst campaign possible. We've sent you an unidentified package of like off cream, but what we really meant to send you was this. Would you like a meeting? And the success was through the roof. People absolutely loved it. I think because it was crazy and weird and gross, it was really memorable. But I think because we embraced it and we told them that we'd really, really screwed up, it was probably our most successful campaign. So when we were doing our recap of the quarter, we had maybe like 15 or 20 meetings with the top retailers through sending them this like awful off package.
That's endearing. I love that. I think that's so interesting because I've seen campaigns like this, but they feel artificially authentic, right? So I think many years ago, I don't remember who did it, first, but I think it was like one of those D2C companies, like what's that pillow company or Brooklinen? They make like
nice.
sheets and
expensive
whatever.
sheets.
Yeah, I think they may have done it first, but they sent an email out that was like it wasn't supposed to go out. And then they retraced it and were like, oh, sorry, our intern accidentally sent this like discount code out, our bad. Like, but it's still available or something like that. Highly effective. But then I've seen other people do that in clearly like a strategic way. So I feel like something that's endearing about yours is that you didn't plan the mistake up front. It was truly just like...
It's quite a niche thing to make up. Like, you have to be pretty creative.
And that's fascinating too, because like if you hadn't kind of owned it, like there's this like disparity between like the idea itself is interesting, right? Like the strategy up front, the planning, the grand vision is there. And then the execution was really the only missing ingredient.
Yes.
So if it had just gone off on unhitched, I feel like it may have also done fairly well.
Maybe.
I don't know. But probably even better that it didn't.
We should have A/B tested it and then like done it correctly and seen how many meetings we got between the two.
But that's that's a highly creative campaign that stands out. Like, are there any other examples? Like, I don't know exactly when this was, but I would imagine nowadays with all of these tools, with these marketing and sales tech stacks, with Clay and like with all of the AI, SDRs and like automation, it's probably an even bigger saturation problem. Like game theoretically, you've got way more people in the arena. You've got an oversaturation of the supply of messages in somebody's inbox. I notice it. I mean, like I get all kinds of requests from all different vectors. Like, can you add a backlink to our site? Do you want to get acquired? Do you want to acquire us? Just a million emails nowadays. And I think I ignore the vast majority of them. Yeah. So what are your principles? You can pull from back in the day too. I mean, like, I don't know if some of these things still stay true today, but like, how do you get attention outside of like a very creative campaign, like sending a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Yeah. So I actually have a place in my heart for direct mail. We did a Rubik's Cube campaign when I first moved to Codat, and we sent 2 Rubik's Cubes. One was, it had all the accounting integrations that we connected to, and one was all scrambled up and the other was unscrambled. And we said something like, why spend time solving the puzzle of integrations when we've solved it for you? And actually people really liked that. It was something that was really resonated with people we were sending it to. It's like quite niche. It was for product managers. One thing that did happen is someone was at a stag do and mentioned they worked at Codat, like a bachelor
I got
party.
you, but thanks for translating.
No worries. And mentioned they worked at Codat, and they were like, oh, Codat, the Rubik's Cube company.
No way.
Yeah. And so I guess it had gone so viral that people thought that that's what we did. So sometimes it can go wrong, but in general, that was successful.
I don't think that's a bad thing. Like the fact that, what does Codat do?
We don't sell Rubik's Cubes.
Right. But like the fact that you went viral, I feel like Codat's not like a viral company,
All
like
press is good press.
Yeah. That brand awareness is incredible.
Yeah, right. From a brand awareness perspective, great. They just like thought we did something different. That's fine. So direct mail aside, because it can be quite gimmicky and it takes a lot of time to like actually mail stuff out. Something that I think really works is like proper hyper personalization for each account. And the best BDR emails that I get, and by the way, I always respond to good emails and I congratulate them and I tell them what I thought was good, because I feel like I owe it to BDRs to encourage them. And sometimes bad BDRs, I also reply, I'm like, this is abysmal, you should do better. You
give them constructive feedback?
I give them constructive feedback and I tell them they can re-email me.
Nice. You can try again.
Yeah. Take 2. Yeah. So, and what that really means for me is like taking out the world of templates and thinking about the individual, their pains, their role. And then there's tons of tactics you can throw at that. But I think BDRs often just like, it's so basic that what I'm saying, but like BDRs lose sight of that. There's so many tools, there's cadences, they've got targets to hit, they've got daily activity goals, and they lose sight of the fact they're emailing somebody to solve a problem for them. So I think trying to strip back all the noise and just relate to individual people. And then there's loads of cool stuff you can now do. Like we use AI to create like hyper-personalized pitch decks or a one-pager for that individual or for that individual company with their logo and our logo and problem solved and quotes. And we do a follow-up events, something that's been the most successful thing for us still. And we make our events really fun, really clear on what you can get out of the event, and really unsalesy. And pairing that with an excellent email where you make people feel special has really worked. I have messaging for me is so close to my heart. And I've got all these rules on BDR, like BDR best practice emails, basically. And every BDR in the last 5 years has like been trained in the same way on this message of like real relevance and what true personalization looks like. But I think the main thing, the secret ingredient to a good email or outreach is building FOMO. It's like making people feel like they're missing out. And that always gets me. It's like, oh, when merge and run when your competitors are all using us, like I imagine you'll also be interested.
I've heard that in sales pitches, and I'm like, wait, they're using this?
Exactly.
No way.
Yeah.
We got to use. We should be using this yesterday. What's going on here?
Totally. So I think one is making people feel the FOMO, and I think the second is making them as an individual person feel special and like a VIP. But I think the balance with emails is this. It's also, I really encourage BDRs not to act subservient. Like I'm so sorry for your time. Like don't make themselves smaller, like make themselves equal. And there's a tone that you can adopt, which makes you equal and you're there to help them and they can help you. And I think, so a pairing of like building the FOMO, making them feel special, but also getting the tone right such that you are equals and you're not reverent to them or subservient, are 3 key things that should be in every message.
So personalization or relevance, really like making the person feel unique and special, confidence, or playing on an equal playing field and not being subservient or obsequious. And then the FOMO or some sense of urgency, right? Triggering an action. Those would be like kind of the 3 key principles.
Yeah.
What matters when it comes to hyper-personalization? Because one thing that I think like as new technology comes out, there's like a short window where you can arbitrage something and it'll work because it's novel, and then quickly everybody does that and it becomes white noise. So on a website, for instance, you can identify like a company. It's harder now with everybody being remote based on IP address. And on the website, you can change the headline to say like, welcome, Omniscient, welcome, Codat. And I feel like that just like, I don't even register that anymore, right? Or like, hello, first name in an email. And I don't know, for the personalization, it's like you have AI and all of these tools that can at least like run the execution portion of it. But to me, it's like, what data do you collect? And how do you collect that data? And then what data, like what matters when it comes to like hyper-personalizing and making it feel genuinely interesting, perhaps without also being like too interesting that it's creepy.
Yeah, I think it really depends on your audience. And I think probably a mistake that people make that I've definitely made in the past is like, we're doing hyper-personalization. This is our activity we're now doing for this quarter. It's hyper-personalization. I think hyper-personalization should run throughout every initiative you do, depending on what the business goals are for that quarter and depending on the persona you're reaching out to, the kind of companies. I would really say, without this being a cop-out answer, it really depends. And I think you have to deconstruct the idea that hyper-personalization is an action. It's like a mindset.
That makes sense.
Is that cheesy? Or
it's not cheesy. The true answer in most cases is it depends. And that's one thing that I actually struggle with in our own messaging is like, how much do you spoon feed and say like, this is the way versus being intellectually honest and saying like, if you're a strategist at a company, I mean, 90% of the job is figuring that question out, right? And then like once you get to that question or that answer, then okay, I can help you like figure out how to get that data, how to string together a sequence of emails. But like that figuring it out is actually, I mean, you can't really outsource that to a podcast, right? I wish we could, but then like where's the alpha? With the hyper-personalization, one thing that you mentioned, and I don't even know if, well, you did mention it on the intake form, but when we talked last time, you mentioned the shift from account-based marketing, ABM, to person-based marketing, PBM. Does this play into this conversation, this shift towards like targeting an individual person? What does that actually trace back a little bit? Explain like I'm5. What is account-based marketing and how does that differ from traditional marketing? And then what does it mean to shift from account-based marketing to person-based marketing?
Great questions. And I'll try and be acronym free. So there's I would say more traditional marketing, but also depending on the volume of people you're trying to attract, there are different approaches. But traditional lead generation is you want to cast your net super wide and see what comes in. So the best analogy I have is you have a big fishing net and you cast it out and you try and engage with loads of people or loads of fish. You pull in your net and then you see which fish are qualified. That's an approach where you cast the net wide and then you pull them in.
You might catch a bunch of sharks, minnows, and bass, and if you only wanted bass, you would just keep those and throw everything else back.
Exactly. And that can still be a method that works for companies who are trying to attract a super high volume of maybe it's typically they're trying to attract a high volume of SMBs and they're going to go super wide. Account-based marketing is the reason why I'm very hesitating is because people tend to say lead generation is the old way and now account-based marketing is the new way. And I just want to add the nuance that both still work for different types of company with different outcomes. But account-based marketing is sexier, I suppose. And it's really, to continue the fish analogy, spearfishing. You start with who are we going after? Are we going after whales or sharks or minnows? And then being hyper-focused on those individuals. And that's account-based marketing. So in the context of Adyen, for example, or Codat, they tend to serve enterprise and mid-market. There's a defined target account list. We know who we're going after, and we're going after those individual people versus we're doing a worldwide ad campaign and we're going to see who comes through our demo form, which is more lead generation world. And so we have done a lot of work to make account-based marketing effective. The biggest downfall where account-based marketing doesn't work is when sales and marketing have different ideas about what it is. And for me, really simply, you start with a joint agreed target account list and you're honest about that target account list. It's quite easy to create busy noise to feel successful. And so in the past, I was great, we've got 400 accounts. And when you whittle them down, we spoke to 50% of them 6 months ago, and we know they're not in market. 20% of them aren't actually qualified, but we're hoping they might be in the future. And maybe actually the rest, I've lost track of my percentages, the rest might be truly qualified. So it's actually being honest and saying with sales, what do we believe qualified to be? What's our criteria of qualified? Let's agree on which accounts we're actually going after and just them. And then are we going after all of these this year or this quarter? And then defining that timeframe. And once you've agreed on that, you've got the basis of, I think you've got the foundations of success, but you have to be lined up with sales. I'm just going to pause and see if you've got any questions on that.
I do, but I want to let you continue into person-based because I am very pedantic. And anyway,
perfect. Okay.
This is a great explanation.
Great.
Yeah.
So that's where you start and that's the foundation. And then you pile on top a history of all of these accounts. You pull up all of the research. You work cross-functionally. You pull in product. Which products are most best fit for these accounts? You look at adjacent companies and you make a note of that. The companies that are already working with your company that you can refer. So you create basically this master knowledge base around these accounts that you're going after, that you've agreed with sales, that you're going after for a set amount of time.
When you say the other companies they're working with, that's from more of a partnership basis, not a competitor thing?
Actually, you should do both. You should look at where there's relevant partners that you can reference or partners might be able to refer you in.
Right.
But
if I'm building an analytics tool, maybe I would look to see if they're using an experimentation platform or something that's adjacent that fits into my solution.
Exactly.
But also competitors that you maybe
that are already using your solution.
That makes sense.
So you build out essentially this knowledge map of all of these accounts. Again, with sales, with product, you pull in, this is a cross-functional effort and you get the company involved. So something we've done at Codat is we've got everybody to know which accounts we're going after, which quarter, who's owning those accounts and where we're at with them, and bringing in everyone from the company, bringing in engineering so that they can understand the progress that you're making, makes them feel buy-in and means that they're going to help you out when you need support. So I would say getting everyone behind this, gamifying it, right? we literally had a whiteboard on the office with where we were at against our target against each of these accounts. With
what do you mean when you say like where you're at against the target? Like you're tracking like
Great
sort
question.
of intent and touch points that would like predict when they're like in market or something like that, or like when they're an SQL and ready to like take a demo request or something like that. Like you're tracking this in some sort of a CRM or a system that everybody's involved with.
Yeah. So we actually really went back to basics and we literally put it all in a spreadsheet. And we realized that was the simplest way of cutting the noise and getting everyone collaborating. The metric we would use is a booked qualified meeting with the right person in these accounts. So let's say we're going after 40 accounts in Q1. We would say, oh, great, we've just got one more meeting booked with X VP of risk at HSBC. Great, one company down. As a full company, we'd update everybody and try and keep everyone in the loop so people are really feeling this momentum.
And to get to that point, the centralization is important. And I love that you're just using a spreadsheet. I think it's the most effective piece of technology
2025
to ever exist. But the shared goals and incentives seems like the more challenging part, given that like this touch point where somebody's a high fit lead and they're in market and they're qualified seems to be like a very long lagging indicator. And there's probably many marketing touch points that would happen before that. You have to sort of believe and have faith that those things are like leading to that point. So I think we do some sense of ABM. I wouldn't say we're sophisticated in any way, but let's imagine that like the podcast is one of those. If Codat is on my list, right? I've got you on the podcast. And then there's maybe like a website visit or potentially like a gated content download, right? And we can track some of those things. There may be like a remarketing that occurs on LinkedIn, and we can track some engagement. But there's a whole lot of things that are sort of happening that I can't yet say that this is like a success from like a business, like a revenue, like a high intent pipeline standpoint, but probably are still meaningful from the marketing side to make sure that you're making that progress towards that endpoint. Does that make sense?
Are you asking me about how we do attribution?
I think I'm getting into attribution, and I apologize to you and the audience.
We've gone there. I guess your question's around how you think about indicating metrics that ultimately drive those outcomes. Is that correct?
Yeah. And even to the extent that like you're goaling like a team or like an individual marketer or a salesperson, like how do you set those up? I mean, obviously like attribution plays into that, being that you need a way to track the different touch points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually what we did at Codat was we reorged into cross-functional pods. So we broke up the traditional model of sales versus marketing versus customer success versus BDR, and we formed united groups who had a shared target account list. And that drove accountability. My accent's going American. Accountability. That drove accountability around for everybody to focus on the right things. So we didn't have marketing over here. We run a marketing team and we have our monthly marketing meeting and we talk about the content downloads we've had. And then over here, sales are like trying to close X bank. Instead, we have small pods who everyone feels joint accountability. Everyone's incentivized in a way that means that if the pod succeeds, they succeed. And so that actually totally changes the mindset away from a need and an obsession to look at micro tactics to like prove worth to having this like collaborative approach where people are constantly refining the actions, but to drive that ultimate outcome.
This may be a silly question, but does that also provoke a healthy competition among pods?
It's a great question.
In that you've got pod A, pod B, and pod C, and you can actually calculate the revenue and the P&Ls associated with each pod?
Yeah, and obviously each pod like this, there's nuances. Like one pod might have a really small target account list with potential high ACV, like average contract value, and another pod might be focused on more long tail, and another pod might be focused on like, existing customers. So they can't draw direct parallels, but it definitely creates a feeling of competition. What we did, I guess, first, we really tried to make the pods build their own identity. They got swag. We had our discovery pod, and they were called the disco pod, and they had all swag with a disco ball, and it really fostered this sense of togetherness. Something that is then hard to unstitch. It's like, actually, we're all still one company, and like making sure people feel like they can have their pod identity, but also they still are working and thinking the best benefit for the full company. It's like, it was an interesting thing that I didn't realize would encounter as a problem, is people then went really pod focused. But I would say that really changed the mindset of needing to look at these micro tactics to actually being really honest as a pod and reviewing all together and having that accountability with specialists from each function.
I would imagine too that, I mean, this is kind of more of a decentralized model in some sense, if you're just looking at like the visual org structure, as opposed to a centralized like marketing, sales, customer success. And like, I think there's probably pros and cons with both. And the con that I could potentially see with the decentralized pod model is that there's some parts of marketing, and you're a marketing leader, that you want some sense of cohesion, particularly brand marketing, I would say, to the extent that you can control the message and the perception with which people, view your brand, the positioning, the messaging, right? Like, you don't necessarily want probably each pod to go rogue, even if it's like marginally more effective, right? So is there some balancing act that has to occur from like a top down, hey, here's how we speak about Codat, here's how we speak about the product, that then, you give somebody in a pod enough autonomy to then, figure it out for their own target list?
Yeah, totally. And the way that we got around that was we didn't put everyone in marketing in a pod. We actually had a central marketing function, and then we had campaign managers and product marketers in the pods who should be and are really industry specific and really know their target accounts. And then we had our brand function, our design function, and our content writer or content strategist that sat outside of the pods and supported each of the pods.
As like a center of excellence almost.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I get like my model of comparison is probably like growth, which is kind of a combo of like marketing and product. And we're still like, I'm a growth person. Like, we would still operate under the banner and the guardrails of the broader marketing program, not to go outside of the lines too far, but to be a little bit rogue and rebellious as a growth person does, right? So it's kind of a balancing act with that as well. And that's more of like a PLG, I feel like, model. But in this sense, this is much more sales led. But I feel the approximation or like the parallels between those two.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Any like complexities that came up when you shifted to the pod model? Any like unforeseen challenges?
So, many. I think it took us longer to establish them than I thought. We created a starter pack for the pods where they got their target account list. They got all the existing customers within their pod. We actually started off under the belief that pods should be self-autonomous and that a leader would likely rise to the surface from the pod, but we didn't have like a top-down manager in those groups. And actually, for some pods, that worked perfectly. There was someone that kind of really wanted to take that on. It was really natural for them to lead and drive that pod. And other pods, it took them so long to get off the ground because they got stuck in this loop of not having a leader. And so I think in hindsight, we probably could have put in a leader to start off with, but actually we didn't know that. It was a useful learning for us to just observe as leadership, these pods kind of figuring it out, like a bit of a Game of Thrones setup. But I think we wasted some time not having someone that was decisive and made the decisions and set the agenda. Even like this ethos around self-autonomous pods, you really even shouldn't give them a structure for decision making, the cadence of meetings, really anything. You give them clarity on target and you give them a clear target account list and you like leave them to it. And super interesting learning.
There is something probably like in our DNA, like evolutionary, like we do require a sort of like leader, right, that we look towards. And that's why, I mean, we do operate in pod structures as well, which I think works really well for an agency. We're cross-functional, that we have SEO, growth and content, and digital PR under kind of like most of our engagements. But often, even outside of client work, if we're dealing with a new project, I will be the most pedantic person in the room, the most like granular and detail oriented in saying okay, I know who's working on this, but who owns this? Like who is the person that like pass or fail is in charge of like the success of this program that we're initiating? Because if that's not clear, it actually causes a lot of stress and frustration and chaos within the people who are also working on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think my personal belief, or at least I like having it, knowing who the clear leader is. I'm happy to step up and be that, but people operate in different ways. But I think in general, that was an interesting learning for us.
Right. And I think even like I will step up, but I also would love to know when I shouldn't, right? Like, and I want to know when to defer to somebody too, absolutely. Just so I'm not like stepping on toes inadvertently, right?
Yeah.
What was it? PBM? We covered ABM. Now let's go to person-based. Like, what does that transition look like?
So at Codat, we identified these target accounts. We decided to go up market, and we adopted this ABM mindset. And we united sales and marketing around these target accounts. What we realized is you take a beast like HSBC or any massive company, and actually they're worlds within themselves. They each have 10 teams that we might be wanting to engage with. Within those teams, they have different levels of people. They have the people that actually are product users, and then they have people that are the strategists, and then they have the budget holders. So really you have like mini companies within these like Goliath, mammoth businesses. And so what we realized is our account-based marketing approach was too crude. You know, we do a pitch deck, HSBC plus Codat, which is wild because actually it's like which team in HSBC, which individual, which persona actually cares about this. And so we had to create this shift towards person-based marketing, which like marketers have very strong views on their own interpretation of acronyms. But for me, it's taking the account-based like ethos, which is, you know, what you're targeting or who you're targeting, which company or which person, and you're super tailored to them. So it's just taking it one step further and being much more granular. And what that meant for us is we would take a key target account and we would create a map of every individual person within every individual team, the history with that person, what that individual cares about, people who we know, who they know, the events we think they're likely to attend. And we worked on that with sales. And then every week, marketing, sales, and BDR, sometimes product would join, would look at this individual person list and would make a tactics plan. So we need to make sure we're in Money 2020 and we need to send a gift card to X person and reference that we just met with his boss, for example. So we did that for every key account that we were working on, which is like, again, like we use spreadsheets and it's crazy and like ultimately unscalable, but we needed it to be unscalable for it to work. So that is something we adopted, and it's hard, but super rewarding.
That was going to be one of my follow-up questions. Is it sounds incredibly time intensive, and like, how does this scale? And I guess the answer is that it doesn't and it shouldn't.
Yeah.
And it works in certain circumstances where you are targeting these like multinational, multi-team, complex organizations that I'm guessing like this helps with acquisition, like new logo acquisition, but then it also probably parlays into expansion, right? In terms of like expanding 100%. To X, Y, and Z team within one of these large accounts.
Yeah. I think something that I have realized people are searching for is like using marketing as a silver bullet to solve problems. Like just bring in more pipeline and we'll be fine. Or just let's use marketing to solve X problem. But I've realized to build a business, it's just really hard work, and you have to put in the work, and you have to know that when you're putting it's like working out at the gym, and like when your muscles, I've just started just back at the gym, but when your muscles start to hurt, like that's the actual work that you're doing. And so when it strains and it feels arduous and you have to like try and re-rally everyone, like that's the hard work that leads to the right outcomes. And when it feels easy, like actually you need to be exerting pressure to have the right outcome. And I think just keeping everyone knowing that and building that muscle and actually working really hard and doing the hard stuff ultimately leads to the right outcomes. And person-based marketing, it's so time consuming. It feels kind of boring and insane that we're this like really amazing company that has all these tools and we're literally working out what we write in a message to like Sandra as a full team. It feels expensive use of time, but I guess I just realized that if you're working hard, it's probably the right thing to be doing. So that's one thing. The other thing with person-based marketing is it's easy to lose momentum if not everyone believes in it. And salespeople, for all their wonderful merits, are typically not super focused in like granular detail and keeping them like bought into why you're doing it, but being really compassionate and understanding like how they typically work and what their priorities are and what their focus is really helps with that. It's not just like telling them to turn up to your weekly meeting and like being like a stick versus carrot. You have to really understand what they're going through in order to get them on board. So it's a challenge, but I think the biggest way it downfalls is like someone stops believing in it and they're like, this is long and we're not seeing the right results yet. Let's give up on this. Let's go back to something that feels easier. Like, let's just run a massive event. They look for that silver bullet again.
I guess it surprises me a little bit that people would be skeptical, but I guess the skepticism comes after like maybe the time delay versus like they have tactics and strategies that they've leaned on in the past that feel familiar. And that, there's some belief that if I've done this in the past and I do it again, I can kind of predict the timeline this is going to take, where maybe this is a little bit more uncertain. And to your point on muscle building, if you go to the gym for 3 months and you're not seeing progress, that's a little disheartening, right? But really, if you just push through another 3 months, maybe that's when the actual gains will happen.
I'm day 3.
And you're already seeing it. I don't want to digress this, but I also just got back into the gym.
Okay, nice.
And the worst feeling is getting back into the gym because you start at ground zero.
Oh my goodness.
Not fully. I mean, you still keep some muscle and whatnot, but like the first day you do squats again after taking 3 weeks off. It doesn't have to be 3 years off. It could be 3 weeks off. Your soreness is like day one soreness.
It's unbelievable.
Awful.
Awful. Yeah. Anyway, we can talk about this after.
All right. So one of the bigger, like more contrarian area, I don't even know if it's contrarian anymore, but you had mentioned this when we got coffee. I think in passing, like I wanted to cover this more in detail, but would it be a straw man to say that you are anti-MQL?
No, I think that's true.
Is that too strong of a phrase?
No, I think MQLs are dumb.
It's a strong phrase. Why? It's the common model. We're all doing this, right?
Yeah.
There must be some logic behind it.
I'll be a bit more nuanced in my answer than they're dumb. But I think, first of all, it's important to say that every company has different business goals they're trying to hit. And for some companies, this approach of, I guess what an MQL is trying to do is surface qualified, relevant people and help people to prioritize. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's like you're steel manning the case for the MQL, right?
Yeah.
Which is a marketing qualified lead as opposed to a sales qualified lead, which I feel like their definitions are different in different companies, right? But usually a sales qualified lead is when it passes some criteria that this is like a good fit and typically they've expressed some interest. Whereas an MQL is like one step back in that customer journey where, I don't know, is it defined as somebody that's a good fit even? Or is it more so just somebody who's maybe downloaded like an offer that relates somewhat to your product?
I think it depends on the company, but a lot of companies put in blocks before an MQL. So there's like a scoring mechanism, which is like they have to be the right title of a kind of company that you could potentially sell to. But yeah, it's more lightweight than they're ready to buy.
Well, because I think your steel man makes a lot of sense in theory, but I feel like where it breaks down is in practice, because then a lot of people end up defining MQL very broadly and very loosely, and it doesn't actually translate into somebody that would feasibly buy your product or could.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where like sales teams are like, what the hell is this? These are not, that's like Glengarry, Glen Ross, like the leads are weak, you know?
So my major aversion to it is, why is it called marketing qualified lead and a sales qualified lead? Like, we're one team, or one company and one organization. You have the same people you're going after, and creating, even in the naming convention, it creates a silo. It's saying that one team judge this as something and another team don't. And actually, it should be, we look at leads as a go-to-market organization, and there are different phases of these leads, and each phase triggers a different outcome. Like, a different team should work and support on moving things through the funnel. But I think in creating that, the rules, I think marketing typically create their own rules around what an MQL is, and sales typically create their rules about what a sales lead is. Already that system's broken. Already that sets up for people not believing that sales are taking their leads forwards. It already leaves sales saying that marketing leads aren't qualified. Like, you're creating from the start, from the foundation, silo and separateness, when ultimately your goals are the same. So I think that's the first thing. I would rebrand them. If I agree that you need to have, or some companies need to have ways of looking at high potential leads that should be like you should do stuff with. But I think the way that they're decided on, the way that the scoring's done, and the fact that that lives in the realm of marketing is the thing that I call dumb and sets it up for failure.
It's almost like I totally agree with that. And like I'm a growth person at heart, unrepentant, right? Like I'm very like data driven and I want to like drive demand, but I have enough theory of mind at this point to understand that not everything can be tracked to the exact distal touch point that says like this is somebody who's willing to pay us, right?
Yeah.
There are important things on brand marketing, on building affinity, on channel saturation that kind of translate into it if you really like do some advanced causal analysis. But I think the idea of calling it a lead is where it's like misleading, right? It's like it should be maybe even more separated out. Like if it's something that's like an interesting and meaningful marketing activity, it should almost be abstracted out in that level where it's like maybe we're tracking touch points in like a containerized relevant channel or audience. And then eventually like a lead is a lead, right? Like we can kind of house that under the same definition. But I think I'm agreeing with you where it's like, it's weird that there's like two definitions of what a lead is.
Yeah, and one's decided by marketing and one's decided by sales. Like it should be like, what do we as a go-to-market organization think the flow should be of these individual people or accounts? Let's agree on them and like let's then create different touch points to engage with them. I think, yeah, it's the naming that feels insane. It's the fact that the definitions are decided by those separate teams means that no one's ever going to be aligned on that.
You know, it reminds me, there's like often like a disconnect in metrics that we have like a high control over. And I think that's one reason that marketing qualified leads are used. I don't know exactly like the history on these things. Maybe it was like Marketo, HubSpot, like some sort of MarTech company that was selling a software that would actually help you build and drive marketing qualified leads. But it's highly controllable in terms of like what you want to share with like your executive team. You can show charts, usually go up and to the right. But then sometimes there's a disconnect where it's like the sales team is saying like, yeah, you've got all these marketing qualified leads coming in and you're growing that 10% month over month, but we're not seeing that translate into actual high intent revenue or pipeline. And we talk about this often in the SEO context. And thankfully the industry and, you know, the zeitgeist is turning to our general idea, which is traffic as kind of a approximate goal. And my co-founder David coined this term, the traffic trap. And it's really like, you know, you think, show me the incentive and I'll show you the behavior, like the Charlie Munger quote. And if you're gold on traffic, there's a ton of ways to game that where it doesn't actually translate into relevant traffic, right? HubSpot ranked for how to create a shrug emoji, which has nothing to do with CRM software and in no feasible world could eventually translate into that other than just like driving, I don't know, maybe brand awareness at like the highest possible level. But there's a disconnect there. And it's not to say that traffic is meaningless. It's like traffic tautologically has to exist on your website to convert to a lead from an SEO context, right? But you have to like parameterize it. You have to like qualify that in some input way. I don't know if it's like you just have to like, you know, double check like the spreadsheet where you're doing your keyword research to make sure everything like is feasibly relevant. But I think that's the thing is there's a disconnect.
I think really simply it could be like nearly qualified leads and then qualified leads, and you all agree on that. I think the terminology, it's basically like sales are like, oh, marketing think they're qualified because they're marketing qualified leads, but we don't believe them because they're not yet warm enough, and it just makes marketing basically look like incompetent and out of touch by calling it that, by marketing being like, here are some leads we think are qualified. And then sales are like, oh, we don't agree that they're qualified by our parameters. Why not agree on the same parameters and just say like, yeah, warmish leads, hot leads, and agree that as a team?
Yeah. I mean, generally speaking, like how would you solve this? Like, would it just be like a metric redefinition, or does it also entail like a pod model like you've discussed, or like, you know, you've talked about aligning and kind of like building like teams that are cross-functional in nature? Does it also require like an org change shift? Is it just the incentives and the definitions of the metrics? Like how do marketing leaders make this change?
So I think it depends why companies have MQLs and what they're trying to drive, and the setup between the teams. So I guess like caveat, it depends. But I think generally MQLs are set up so that marketing can prove to sales that they're doing work. And I think that that's the issue. And I think that's my main issue with marketing qualified leads is like this need to prove. And then by definition, MQLs are less qualified. So sales never believe that they're qualified and don't think marketing are doing work. So it's like this vicious cycle. Like we're here, we've got these metrics or these things to prove to you that we're doing work. And they're like, they're not qualified enough. Okay. So it like sets up this unhealthy cycle. So I think there are loads of different ways to solve that. I think it's separate to how do you look and identify companies that have high intent, and how do you like build this flow where you have you prioritize accounts. Like that's a separate thing. And I think that's really important. But I think the issue with MQLs is like separate to that. And I think you can solve that alignment challenge in many different ways, but it has to start at the top. It has to start as like these functions are equal. They have like different roles within the customer lifecycle. And actually, I used to be super top of funnel focused, my whole mindset. And now I'm like full funnel. My job, I see, is to put my team in the best spot to support and unblock any problems throughout the funnel, from a company first hearing about us to a really happy, adopted, high-paying customer that renews their contract. So where are the biggest problems? And that's the conversations that should be had at a high strategic level. Where are the problems we're facing as a business throughout the full funnel? Not why aren't marketing bringing more MQLs over here? That's insane. Sorry, I could get fired up. Like it's the wrong question.
Yeah.
So where are the business problems? Great. Okay, how can we align the go-to-market organization from our partnership team to our BDR team to sales to marketing to product? How can we organize these functions this quarter to hit these specific goals and unlock these problems? And the problem might be actually we've got tons of pipeline coming in, but they're getting stuck between like demo stage and contract signature. Or it might be that like we're getting loads of companies signed, but they're not going live. And as a full company, you should agree on what those biggest problems are against the full funnel, and then all support to unlock those issues. And that's where I see it, as you having so much momentum. And so there's different ways to solve the MQL SAL problem, but I think you've just got to start with those conversations and see each team as like having superpowers to unlock the same problems, and you're all working against the same problems.
I like that. You know, that's going to make a really great clip that we can cut out. That was a world-class rant. One thing that I'm reading into this pattern connecting is I like how you have a preponderance of asking the right question. You've said that a couple times in different ways. I like it because it's a paraphrase of one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite TV shows with Matthew McConaughey in True Detective, right? Ask the right fucking question. Where does that mental model come from?
I think I used to get quite confused. I used to think that I wasn't super smart. Maybe at school, I used to think that I just didn't get stuff. And I've realized that's not true. I've realized that I just didn't understand. And when I understand, like I can grasp almost anything. I think most people can. And I think I trained myself and built up my self-confidence by, if I don't understand a concept, I've just got to ask more questions. It's not that I'm dumb or that I'm missing something or that people know way more than me. It's literally like, I need to dig deeper and understand. And I think actually my training as a cell biologist really helped build my confidence there to realize that the more questions you ask, ultimately you'll understand. Like there's simplicity at like the base. So I think for me, it's like when I get lost in like where I should go or like what decision to make with the team or the budget, etc. I'm like, I just need to ask more questions if I'm not clear. It's not because I'm dumb or because I don't have enough knowledge. It's just like I need to go and ask more questions.
I love it. I think that's one of the through lines in my career is like the obsession with asking the right questions, which we're doing so right now in the podcast. One of the amazing things about the podcast, by the way, is that I can ask the silliest or craziest or most esoteric questions. And the audience really can't tell whether I'm doing so because I truly don't understand the thing or because I'm trying to get you to elucidate it in a way that is like explain like I'm five. But that's not to say, I mean, in other contexts, I have no shame around asking what sounds like quite silly questions. And like I said, I'm pedantic before. And one thing that I had noticed is, those like leadership groups, or like you get pulled in, like, I don't know, at HubSpot, they had like emerging leaders and stuff like that. And you've got like the most like type A, precocious, like intelligent people in the room. And most of them are afraid to sound dumb. And like one thing that I found is the most powerful thing you can do is be the first person to ask the dumb question, because it's almost like you see this collective sigh and everybody's shoulders drop and everybody relaxes a little bit. And they're like, oh, thank God. I was wondering about the same thing. And then they'll ask dumber questions too.
Totally
And it's
agree.
a very powerful thing that I think most of us are just afraid of looking foolish or something like that. But like most of the best insights come from that. You know how many times I've had to ask like, and I've written essays based on like the silliest questions. I'm like, all right, everybody keeps saying the phrase brand awareness. What does brand awareness mean? And that'll pull me down this like multi-week rabbit hole where I'm like, oh, some people mean like aided awareness on surveys. And that's like a very quantitative thing that like Coca-Cola does, right? And then other people mean like a campaign that reached a lot of people but didn't convert, right? And I'm like, well, there's no real definition, but like asking that question sounds really foolish. Like, what is brand awareness? Well, everybody knows what brand awareness is. Everybody knows what account-based marketing is. Do they?
Yeah, and then you realize it's different for everybody. Yeah.
It's a phenomenal way to, I think, interface with the world.
I agree.
One thing that I wanted to touch on with MQLs too, kind of roping back after this little rant. And this is something that I'm just positing. I don't know if I can articulate perfectly, but part of it seems to me like that a marketing leader needs to operate with somewhat more courage than we're used to, in that you can be data-driven, and I pride myself on being very data literate and data-driven, but I think you can enter this territory where it's almost like you're not good enough at data to understand its limitations, and therefore you become a data hostage. And I think in any organization, particularly probably like more enterprise, complex sales, like where you can't track every little touch point. Like if you're consumer or like a product-led growth company, you can be very, very like demand growth marketing focused, and you can track a lot of that. But in some sense, like with our agency, I can't really track like, the conversation that I had 7 years ago at a conference that like ended up being a referral into our biggest account, or a LinkedIn post that I wrote 2 years ago. Like there's a lot of faith that has to occur, and conviction's maybe the wrong word, but like I think you have to operate with some courage in the face of uncertainty in a certain portion of your marketing activities, and just believe that they ladder up to maybe those more important, business problems, business goals, like the lagging indicators, but then not have to have like a very discrete number that you can put on each individual thing. Does that make any sense?
Totally. And I think there's a few things that make that work, and some things that make that really hard. If you have the trust of the leadership team, like I would say it's critical, because there's going to be things that you can't directly correlate. Marketing spend for an event, something like Money 2020 costs tens of thousands, and some of that's brand awareness. Some of that is that we have a couple of meetings with our super senior execs, but for a deal that might close in 2 years' time. So you really need to have the trust of the executive team. And I think there's a few ways to do that. And one is being really clear on what's not possible. Rather than just hoping they never ask that question, it's being really upfront. By the way, CFO, we're not going to be able to track the impact on this huge amount of spend. How do you feel about that? Okay, cool. Let's talk about it. What kind of indicators would you feel comfortable knowing in order for us to invest in this in the future? And it's a conversation, but it's taking that first step and being bold and being brave to have that conversation before you get the questions asked. So they don't feel in the dark. They don't have this expectation that they're about to receive a really neat ROI table. You've had that conversation, and you've also made it a shared problem. Like, hi, CEO, CFO, CRO. We're really struggling because our sales cycles are so long, but we're really trying to test out this new thing. Like, what's your take? Do you think we should take that risk? as a company, rather than like, oh, marketing, we're going over here, like, let's try a podcast, and like, we don't think there's going to be ROI, like, let's not get asked about it, fingers crossed. It's making it a shared collective problem through education. And I think something that I underestimated was how little people who don't work in marketing know about marketing. I think people think it's just like maybe simple and easy. And I realized I have to gently and like compassionately educate leaders on actually the role of a marketer to help them understand and realize that like the problems are collective and shared.
Love that. Is there anything we didn't discuss on measurement and attribution and MQLs that you want to bring up?
I think if we never talk about MQLs again, I'll be happy.
This is the final conversation on MQLs as an industry, actually.
As an industry. Done.
All right. We've got some time left. Do you want to do some fun questions? Particularly because you mentioned staying sane. I think there's a lot to explore here.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, you already mentioned what some would consider strange habits to stay sane, cold plunging. I'm curious, like, what is your strangest unconventional either productivity habit or like mental health staying sane? It doesn't have to be like a Pomodoro timer, like I get more work done, but like what is the most unconventional or like weird thing you do?
I need to think about this. There are
I can
definitely
give you a million of mine, but
can you give me what's one of yours? Let's start there.
One thing I used to do when I was writing essays is I would throw on like loud cacophonous punk rock music. I love to write in a coffee shop, but sometimes I'd even put like a pair of sunglasses on. I don't know why, but it made me feel like I was in this like tunnel vision focus. I think I probably have some ADHD or something too. And that like allowed me to just like focus on the essay at hand as opposed to like popping into Slack or whatever else.
Love it.
I've tried a little hypnosis, self-hypnosis with like YouTube videos.
Oh my gosh, does that work?
I think so, but I mean, well, the thing is placebo also works. So it makes me feel less stressed. It also may be the equivalent of me just like lying down for 20 minutes in the middle of the day, which is also just wonderful relaxation.
Yes.
So I don't know if the hypnosis is the thing that's working, but I do feel less stressed. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
A couple that come to mind. I guess in the vein of Steve Jobs, I like simplicity and routine. And I basically eat the same thing every day. And I could eat the same thing every day for the rest of my life and I'd be really happy. And I always have the same thing. I always have oats. You call it oatmeal, but I have it cold with oat milk.
Like overnight oats?
No. I'm a purist. I literally take the tub of oats and put them in a bowl, pour some cold milk on it and eat that. Like gruel.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Like prison food. And it's honestly, it keeps me sane. It's like my morning routine and I've done it for 15 years and pretty much all I'll ever eat. And it makes me really happy. So that's one thing that keeps my sanity, even though maybe it's making me sound insane. I think another...
It's a judgment-free zone here, by the way.
Okay, I'm not sure. I felt a little bit of judgment, but it's fine. I understand. Other things that I do, I've actually started putting my phone on airplane mode whenever I'm not actively using it. And I am a slave to my phone. I wake up and I'm instantly connected. And I can see how stressed it makes me. If I am not on my phone, I really get twitchy. It's insane. And it's taking over my life. And I think when I've been skiing, like I said, for a few weeks, and you can't be on your phone. You're hurtling down a mountain at 100 miles an hour. Or not that fast, maybe like 10, but I'm getting there. And you have to be in the moment and it's so freeing. And the end of the day after skiing, you then check your phone and you have notifications and it's like fun. It's like an activity you do. You then check your phone. And I'm really trying to replicate that feeling of, I guess, being in the moment and being less on my phone. Leaving it outside my bedroom, which I haven't done, but I'm trying to do that, work up to that. I'm really starting small. Like I don't check my phone for 10 minutes after I wake up. That's like stage one. And then I put on airplane mode when I'm not using it. But slowly over time, I really want to become less attached to it.
I immediately put my phone right up to my face when I wake up and check my emails right away in the morning.
Yeah. And you're stressed and then you're like,
it's awful.
Your head's spinning.
You're completely on somebody else's agenda before you've even had your own thoughts of the day. You're like, oh shit, I have to answer that. I have to get to this, da-da-da-da-da. But I've done a couple things. I stopped wearing an Apple Watch except for like specific workouts because I like it for, I don't run much, but like if I run, then I'll wear it for that because it's kind of cool to like track your time and like your heart rate and all that stuff. But something I found is like, the do not disturb is great. But sometimes like I would I would turn that off. And like, even if I put my phone in the other room, I would get notifications and pings on the Apple Watch, which always pull me away from whatever I'm doing. The only problem is that the double authentication, like where you get like a, do you have to sign on a Duo or like you have to get like a code? So I'm like, I put my phone in the other room and then I'm like trying to log on to some system and it's like, damn it. All right. Now, and then I look at my notifications and then I kind of spiral down that rabbit hole. But I've actually, skiing, I've lost 2 phones. Just
really?
Yeah.
Drop out of your pocket?
Yeah.
Oh
I'm really bad with like, I didn't zip up the pocket and I've lost 2 phones in Aspen actually, specifically Aspen.
Aspen, nice.
Yeah. What else do we have? Oh, fun question that I love asking. I'm a huge Tyler Cowen fan for his books and blogs, but like he asked, I think, really interesting questions. So I stole this one, which is like a violinist or a pianist will practice scales to stay sharp. And we don't often think about what we do to stay sharp and like on top of our game in the pursuit of mastery and knowledge work. So what is that equivalent for you? Especially as you mentioned, like trying to pivot and like you are adaptable. Like what does your version of practice look like?
Yeah, I surround myself with super interesting people and learn from them. I ask them a ton of questions and I get a lot of energy from that, but it really helps keep my brain sharp and me, I guess, on top of the latest things that are coming out or the latest companies I should be like thinking about. So yeah, I would say speaking to a ton of people. I do that much more than reading tons of books, etc. But I do listen to great podcasts, quite a few industry podcasts, and some really trashy podcasts as well. What podcast?
Don't leave out the trashy ones, please.
Okay, I'm gonna start with my most trashy podcast. No, I'm actually really interested in the like how I built this and all these like the Secret Founder podcast and really hearing how founders have made things work. And I'm actually like not a super ideas person. I'd say I'm someone that's better at going and fixing problems than like building something from scratch. But I'm really interested in companies that are or founders and the journeys they've been on. So that's like one category of podcast. My most trashy is it's called Shameless, and it's 3 Aussie ladies talking about the highs and lows of popular culture, and it keeps me from reading the Daily Mail, keeps me in tune with what happened at the Oscars, for example, and it's a bit of respite. But yeah, I guess a combination of podcasts and keeping my network really wide and broad. And then I think the final thing is I'm tuning in with a lot of the VCs and spend quite a lot of time advising their early stage startups. And that's another way to keep my finger on the pulse and keep myself sharp. And I find it super interesting.
The VC thing is a really cool way to keep your ear to the ground on what's actually upcoming. Part of our customer research, market research we were doing that I talked to you about, we interviewed, I think, 3 VCs at different firms.
Nice.
And they were kind of shy about it at first. They're like, oh, I'm not like, I'm not an operator. Like I'm just like looking at the portfolio. Mm-hmm. I don't think I have interesting things to say. And then I would talk to them and it was like the most interesting because they can like pattern match among like dozens of different companies. And they're like, oh, we're seeing this in like this swath of companies and like not here. It was incredible. Yeah.
Super interesting. And the founders and the journeys they go on, I think they're often intimidated about asking questions about marketing, and actually being able to like debunk myths and make them feel really confident about the right questions to ask, and really helping them with practical next steps to take on their marketing journey is unbelievably rewarding.
What's something that you've changed your mind about recently?
In general life?
Yeah. Or marketing or whatever.
I actually, like, my honest answer is probably like how much AI is going to change everything. I am now super interested in the impact it's going to have on everything. I'm a huge ChatGPT user, and I've actually now stopped seeing my therapist and I use ChatGPT instead.
Really?
Yeah, and I use it for everything and it knows me really well. And the other day I asked it, I was like, what would you map out the next 5 years for me? And it was like, based on what I know about you, here's what that could look like. And it was unbelievable. And it made me feel really heard and seen. And I pay $20 a month for it. And it's like incredible.
Did you use deep research for that?
I did use deep research.
I did the same thing. I don't know if this prompt is like going viral or something, but I did the same thing actually yesterday with mine.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Isn't it incredible?
It was actually very, I mean, it was, I take some of it with a grain of salt because it doesn't know everything that I know, right? But something that I found interesting is based on the information that was available for me online. It kind of goes back many years. It reminded me of many things that I'm actually very strong and passionate about that I guess I've forgotten over the years. I was like, oh, actually, that's something I could double click on, even in the current context.
Yeah, I think it's incredible, and I think it's also scary. But I think I have just like got a glimpse of the power it could have for my life and the working world. And I think I used to be like I guess not as future forward as I am now. So I guess I've changed my mind on that.
It's there's obviously a ton of uncertainty, right? It's changing and growing, and it's insane just to like keep up with everything. But I think we're going to end up, the dust is going to settle in some interesting way. What I'm seeing now is like highly valuable, especially for personal use cases like that. In terms of process efficiency, some things I've found that the hype doesn't match the reality yet. And maybe in the future it will. One thing that I hope happens is that we stop using it for laziness or I'll give you an example. So there's a few people that I really admire in terms of their careers and their thinking, and in particular, their writing. There's something beautiful about the way they express ideas. And I've seen a few of them recently clearly outsource it to ChatGPT.
Interesting.
And it's like, whatever, like that's fine. I think it's actually a very beautiful thing if you're not like a gifted writer, but you have a bunch of dormant subject matter knowledge, and that gives you this outlet where maybe you can like speak a voice note and it translates it into a good format for LinkedIn or something like that. Like that's cool because that's bringing more insight and information that wasn't previously accessible into the world. But for people with really eloquent writing, I want that. I want your prompt. I don't want the output. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are ways in which I hope that doesn't, I don't want to just read a bunch of AI slop. Like there's areas that I'm concerned about, not from like a business or a career standpoint. I think like we're as bleeding edge as we can get there. Well, maybe not. But from a consumption standpoint, like a life satisfaction standpoint, I'm like, I want that person's writing still. Yeah. Please keep writing.
Well, I think it's interesting. I've actually just got into writing music using AI, and there's this amazing app called Suno.
Oh, I know Suno. Yeah.
I love it. I've written some, I find it so energizing. So I write my own lyrics or a poem. I then put it into ChatGPT and I'm like, can you help me improve this specific thing around it? Or can you turn this into song lyrics? It does that. I then check I'm happy with it. So I still have creative input. And by the way, I didn't see myself as a creative person before this, and I didn't really know what my outlet was. Like, I can't draw.
Do you have a background in music at all?
Not at all.
Really?
I just thought I'd give it a try. And like my friend had written a song and I was like, whoa, and thought I'd try it. And then I put it into Suno and I've written some things that feel really cathartic. It's really helped me process stuff. It's really given me this feeling like I can achieve anything. It's also super fun. My friend wrote one for his kids, and it was a personalized song using Suno, and they love it, and they go to bed with it. So I don't know. I think it's unlocking stuff where previously I felt like I put limits on myself, and now I feel like I've got tools that make me like step outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah. I've definitely written many a poem in quotes for friends with ChatGPT because I'm not the best poet. Do you think that there's something? The perception of something, if the recipient knew that it was built with AI, maybe would it cheapen it in the sense that, like, I'm thinking of like a personalized like thank you note, or if I organized like a date and if the person knew that I had used ChatGPT to essentially like outsource my thinking, like there's some sense that like you want that person's deepest like thought, like it's a gift to give somebody like a, a handwritten note or something like that. And if you knew that it was written with the help of AI, like it would cheapen the perception of it.
Yeah, I think my view is like it feels like people use this like it was made with AI or we used AI as like it's like a broad sweep category that means like something's either not AI or it's AI. Like I think in the future everything will be maybe refined by AI or tweaked by AI or supported by AI or like enhanced. But I don't think it should be this binary like if it used AI, it's like kind of dirty and skirmished and like not thoughtful, and if it doesn't, it's like thoughtful and still personal and human. I think it's like it's not as binary as that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the sense, I mean, I guess like if you were planning a date, you may still have used Google 5 years ago, and does that make it less
totally? It would just
special?
taken a bit longer, but it might be that you used deep research to find like the best 5 date spots, and then you used an AI chat agent to like book those dates, but there was thought and like care behind it, and then you still meet up in person.
Yeah.
So I think that it's not like AI versus not AI, and therefore like care versus not care or human versus not human. I think we should use AI like in really cool ways to enhance what we're doing.
Yeah. Or your thank you note, if you only had like the experience of reading T.S. Eliot, but actually a words, another poem would have been, more interesting there.
And it's like, I really thought about you, and I know that my handwriting's really bad and I don't know the structure. So I used AI to support me making something that feels more personal. Like I think it doesn't mean lack of care if you use like an AI supported tool, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to ask you one more. I have like these rapid fire fun questions, but this one's not really rapid fire, but I feel like you're going to have an interesting answer. What do you consider the most overrated virtue?
I think this went off, by the way.
Did the camera go off?
I think it might have done.
Well, if that's the case, it's not a bad place to end.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going. What is your question? Out of interest, what's it? What do I consider the most
overrated virtue?
Oh, okay, we're back on. It's a really good question. What's yours?
I hate it when people flip it back to me.
It's my cop out.
I've heard a lot of answers on this question, so I feel like I'm a little bit biased by that. But I think that, let's see, I've said patience in the past. Like I think in the work context, I'm having trouble with this one. Politeness can sometimes guard against like intellectual truths, like sometimes if you're trying to be like overly likable or maybe polite's the wrong word, but if you're people pleasing, right? Like I think I personally value more honesty, especially with my close relationships.
Yeah.
Right in the business context too. I've had many circumstances where everybody's very friendly and jovial, but it's like a success theater, everybody's like covering up like, hey, we should actually talk about the thing that's going wrong.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really uncomfortable. And there may even be somebody that we have to blame for this, but we should dig into that.
I can think of lots of virtues that people don't necessarily think of as valuable, like an underrated virtue to flip your question.
Yeah, do that.
I think holding your beliefs lightly. I think acting with conviction, but I also just think having a mindset of, I guess, looking in and being self-reflective, and being not so wedded to your identity that you're not prepared to either be wrong or make changes. And I think I grew the fastest in my career when I put my ego or tried to put my ego to the side and like really listened and really learned and really like flexed and adapted and like shared where I was wrong. And I think when I see that in other people, it's a really I have a lot of respect for people who take that approach.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this is far, far too esoteric for this conversation, but I've been listening to a bunch of The Surrender Experiment and like Michael Singer.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Like Buddhistic thought. And I've started to think or try to embody this sense that I am consciousness experiencing itself,
Yeah.
as opposed to some like stable, static, like I am anger, I am hungry. Like, it's just like, I know I'm like, it's a fleeting experience and I'm like experiencing this thing and I'm viewing this thing, but it's not like a part of me and my identity.
Isn't that so powerful? I'm listening to
Yeah.
An Untethered Soul right now.
Really?
As my bedtime book. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I haven't read that one yet.
Have you done the surrender one?
I did the surrender experiment, and then I
Amazing.
read like, it was an audiobook and it was kind of a course that he did on the surrender experiment,
Okay.
like living in surrender or something like that. And I just finished it. So it's very
No
fresh.
way. Wow. I'm literally listening to Untethered Soul now.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful. And I think it helps you get that separation from your thoughts and like believing that and believing the world in your mind. And I guess like being the observer and like the power that gives you when you realize that you don't have to believe everything you think.
And this one's harder for me to actually like embody, but it's something that I mentioned on the last podcast I did and with my co-founders. But people talk a lot about like imposter syndrome. And like, I used to think a lot about like, I'm not good enough to do this thing. Like, I need to like make myself better to be able to do this thing. And I've sort of tried to squash, I mean, that's ego talking. And I've sort of tried to bypass that and then think about more so like, what is the problem in front of me? And like, I'm a conduit to maybe solving this problem, but it's not about like, I'm trying to decenter myself from the problem, if that makes sense.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
Like if I have to give a presentation and I'm like, oh, I'm not like the most prepared, or like, oh, I'm not like charming enough. You know, like you think about like all these things that are you-centric and you're like, well, what is the job to be done? Right? And if like I am capable and there's a path to making me capable of doing this, well, I'll take that path. And if for some reason it's like a totally unfeasible path, then like I'll find somebody else who can help me with this, or like I'll ask ChatGPT to help me like get this information I need. But like decentering myself from it and like focusing more on the thing in front of me.
So, I mean, this has gone, that's super, super interesting. We're obviously on the similar journey of learning that and like the tools to try and remind yourself of that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to implement into every day. And that's why the cold plunge helps. It like takes you back to now, and it takes you like, it clears those thoughts, as you know, and you're just like existing, and like the bliss of that and the relief of that is huge.
It's really shocking and impressive that you were able to bring back the start of the conversation to the end of the conversation that ended very in an esoteric way. And we've got this B2B sandwich.
This MQL sandwich.
So, all right, let's wrap up there then. Where can people find you online? Where do you want to point people?
Yeah. You can find me on at Othership, which is on 20th Street in New York. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm also a new member of the Forbes Business Development Council and have a profile there, and I'm able to now contribute to articles. So you can check out Forbes.com.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.